I survived what no one thought a human could, and the alien queen stared into my eyes, asking, "Are you real?" The first time I opened my eyes on that world, I wasn't sure if I'd landed on a planet or some overzealous light show gone sentient. The ground beneath me shimmered like liquid mercury, reflecting colors that didn't exist on Earth, hues so bright they made me squint even through the haze of my helmet. My left arm throbbed where I'd collided with the landing pod, a dull, insistently human reminder that no amount of alien scenery could make a broken bone feel glamorous. I coughed, which only made the metallic taste of burnt circuits worse, and groaned at my own dramatic entrance. Well, first impression. I'm ugly, I'm wounded, and the locals probably hate me already. I muttered to no one, though a small glowing insect, or was it a drone, hovered lazily above me, blinking like it was laughing. That's when I saw her. She appeared like she had been waiting for me, standing on a rise where the light bent around her, pale skin almost luminous, long ears curving upward like delicate sculptures, and eyes wide with a mixture of suspicion and wonder. She was tall, impossibly elegant, and for a moment I thought I'd crashed into a dream built by someone who had clearly never seen a human fail. Are you real?" she asked, voice like wind chimes over glass, and I couldn't help but wince at how serious she looked. If she thought I was going to vanish into holographic mist, I had bad news for her. "Depends," I said, brushing alien dust off my jacket and showing her my bloodied arm with all the theatrics of a magician revealing a rabbit. "Do you want a real human or a really convincing hallucination? Because I'm fresh out of illusions." She tilted her head, ears twitching, and I almost laughed at the sight. It reminded me of an elf from some long-forgotten Earth myth, except her skin practically glowed in sympathy with the strange flora around her. The air hummed faintly, and I realized it wasn't wind. It was alive, or something that pretended convincingly. Each step I took made the ground ripple as if it had consciousness, or at least a sense of humor. I stumbled once and caught myself with a hand on a tall, bioluminescent plant that shrieked softly, startling both of us. "Sorry," I muttered. "You don't have to scream. I'm friendly. Mostly." She watched silently, her expression a blend of fascination and what I suspected was confusion. We circled each other warily. She moved with grace, each step precise, almost rehearsed, while I moved with all the grace of a cat stepping onto a moving escalator. "You humans," she said finally, "your form is resilient but also absurdly reckless." I grinned, showing her my crooked teeth. "You could say that's our charm or insanity, the lines blur." She didn't laugh, but the tilt of her head told me she wanted to. I tried to stand tall, ignoring the stab in my side from the impact with the pod. My hand instinctively brushed over the wound. She flinched, ears flicking, eyes widening even further. You survived that," she whispered like I'd performed some impossible feat. "I mean how?" "Mostly luck," I said, wincing as a spark of pain shot up my arm. "A little stubbornness, and maybe the universe felt sorry for me." She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she extended her hand in a gesture that seemed ceremonial, though I suspected it was more of a testing thing. I shook it, careful not to crush anything fragile, and made a joke. "So, is this your standard greeting, or do I get the deluxe tour?" She raised an eyebrow, or the closest thing her long, delicate ears allowed, and I could swear she blinked in amusement. The world around us pulsed. Trees, or what I assumed were trees, glimmered with internal light, their leaves floating freely in the air, tethered by something invisible. Strange creatures moved through the undergrowth. Small, quadrupedal beings with translucent skin revealing glowing veins, a mix between jellyfish and rabbits, who darted away as I stumbled through the terrain. I muttered apologies to each as if they were judging me for every misstep. She followed silently, effortlessly keeping pace with my clumsy march, her long hair brushing the tips of the floating foliage without disturbing a single leaf. I tried to make conversation, because that's what humans do when they're terrified and bleeding. "So, what's the deal with this place? Planet Palace theme park for glowing things. She didn't answer right away, only watched me, a small smile tugging at her lips. It is our home, she finally said, voice soft but deliberate. And yet it does not belong to us entirely. The land is alive in a way you would not understand. Try me, I said, leaning against a shimmering rock that looked suspiciously like it might move at any second. I've survived black holes, asteroid fields, and 3 particularly angry space raccoons. I think I can handle a sentient lawn. She didn't laugh outright, but the light in her eyes shifted, almost a spark of amusement. We moved deeper into her world, the landscape growing stranger by the step. Rivers of liquid light twisted over hills, reflecting the sky in impossible gradients. Clouds weren't clouds. They were hovering orbs, refracting the sun's rays into scattered rainbows. At one point, I slipped into one of these rivers and surfaced coughing like a drowned cat, muttering curses about alien aquatherapy. She extended her hand, helping me out with patience, though I couldn't help joking. You know, most humans call that wet. They don't call it glowing liquid of self-reflection. She didn't laugh, but her shoulders twitched, ears swaying as if she were suppressing it. Eventually, we reached a plateau overlooking a valley filled with structures that seemed organic yet intentional, like giant, crystalline flowers that doubled as buildings. She gestured toward them. We are a civilization that grows with the land, not against it, and yet you have survived its hazards. I shrugged, wincing at the pressure in my side again. Well, surviving is kind of a habit, I said, grimacing. Mostly bad decisions, a streak of luck, and occasional heroics, or accidents dressed as heroics. She tilted her head, examining me as if she were trying to reconcile her disbelief with what she was seeing. The more she studied my wound, the more her awe grew. Her delicate fingers hovered near my arm without touching, as if afraid to disturb the proof of human stubbornness. Your species, it defies our understanding, she whispered. You should not endure this. Maybe that's our thing, I said, attempting a grin, though it faltered under the sharp reminder of pain. We endure. Preferably with humor, preferably sarcastic, occasionally heroic, often just lucky. She tilted her head, long ears brushing the air like antennae catching a frequency I couldn't detect. Humor, she asked. Even now, even in pain. Especially now, I said. Pain without jokes is just torture. And honestly, you don't want me quiet. It's scary. She studied me a moment longer, eyes narrowing, lips curving, and I realized for the first time that she was both fascinated and bewildered, entirely caught between disbelief and admiration. I laughed softly, a hollow, human sound, and she didn't interrupt. For the first time, I felt a flicker of control over my situation. Maybe I wasn't dead. Maybe I wasn't a total fool. Maybe, just maybe, this alien queen, this impossibly elegant, long-eared, pale-skinned woman, might find humans more interesting than dangerous. I coughed, trying to smooth over the awkwardness. So, do we talk about treaties now, or do we go for the fun part, like figuring out if your floating food is edible? She regarded me silently, then finally spoke, voice light but filled with gravity. Perhaps first we understand each other. Then we may survive together, though I am not sure either is guaranteed. Survival, humor, and bad decisions. My 3 specialties, I said, forcing a grin despite the ache in my ribs. Shall we? She nodded, and we stepped into the valley together, human and alien. As the world around us pulsed and shimmered, alive and incredulous, as if even the planet itself had to pause to see if I truly was real. The plateau led us to a structure that seemed to grow organically from the ground, its walls shimmering like crystallized water, bending light in a way that made it impossible to tell where one surface ended and another began. I blinked, trying to reconcile my human senses with the impossible geometry around me. So, is this a palace or some kind of sentient building that eats intruders? I asked, though my voice came out as a wheeze when I attempted to stand taller than my battered pride would allow. The alien queen's ears twitched in a way I couldn't read. Was it amusement or irritation? Neither entirely, she said, voice calm, musical with a hint of bemusement. It is a home, a fortress, and a living thing, one that judges your gait most harshly. I gave a mock bow, hand over my heart. Noted. My gait is notoriously bad. Sometimes it trips me, sometimes it trips others. Mostly, it just trips. She didn't laugh, but the way her shoulders shifted told me she was suppressing something that might be the alien equivalent of mirth. We moved through the entrance, and the air inside was almost liquid, thick with energy, warm with some undetectable current that made my hair stand on end. Panels of iridescent material floated before us, shifting as we passed, responding to some unknown intent. I reached out experimentally and a holographic map flared up, spinning slowly. I jerked my hand back. Okay, that's intimidating. Also, I think it just scanned me for weakness, and honestly, it might have found some. You are correct in both assumptions, she said, voice crisp, a faint smile tugging at her lips. It is not accustomed to humans. I rubbed the back of my neck, still wincing from the wound. Well, I'm not accustomed to crystal skyscrapers that move on their own either. So, I guess we're even. Her ears flicked, and I had to suppress a laugh. That subtle twitch was her version of a smirk, and somehow it made her seem both more intimidating and more approachable at the same time. We walked down a corridor that curved gently as if the building itself were breathing. The floor shifted under my weight, adjusting the density of its panels to support me, and I nearly stumbled in surprise. Gravity, mood swings. What's next? I muttered. She raised an eyebrow, and I realized the question was rhetorical. The building responds, she said simply, and sometimes it judges. I made a face. I think it judged me 5 times already. Do I get bonus points if I survive its judgment with dignity? Her lips twitched in a smile. Perhaps. I grinned, wincing slightly. Fantastic. Then I aim for minimal dignity loss. It's a low bar, but still it's something. Eventually, we entered a room where the walls seemed alive, pulsating faintly, like the building's heart. The alien queen gestured toward a central chamber, filled with instruments that defied my understanding. Devices floating in midair, spinning in complex patterns, screens that displayed streams of light and sound I couldn't begin to parse. This is our observation chamber, she said. Here we study our world, its currents, its flows, and its inhabitants. I stepped closer, poking a hovering orb cautiously. It reacted, shifting color and bouncing slightly. Friendly? I asked. She gave me a look that said, asterisk possibly, but I wouldn't trust it with your life. I'm used to things trying to kill me, so friendly's a relative term, I said, reaching out again. This time I grabbed the orb and it spun around my hand like a slippery tennis ball before zipping away with a high-pitched ping. I made a face. Okay, maybe not friendly, slightly homicidal but still pretty. She laughed softly, a sound like wind running through chimes, and I nearly stumbled at the novelty of it. Humor still, she said, ears flicking in rhythm with her words. Even here. Of course, I said. I have a reputation to maintain. If humans were a comic, I'd be the one constantly getting crushed under falling planets but somehow surviving with a joke. She observed me, expression somewhere between disbelief and fascination. You truly are resilient. More than we ever expected. Your injury should have rendered you immobile. Luck, I said simply, though my lips curved into a grin despite the pain. And a good sense of irony. I find that helps. She tilted her head, studying the bandages on my arm that were haphazardly tied with strips of alien fabric. You improvise, she said, in the face of what should destroy you. Yes, I admitted. Improvisation is my middle name. Not legally, but spiritually. She blinked slowly, absorbing this, her long ears twitching as though catching some subtle, undetectable vibration. The observation chamber shifted, streams of data swirling in midair, illuminating her face and revealing contours that seemed almost sculpted from moonlight. Your species, she said finally, is astonishing. You endure the impossible, yet remain humorous, adaptable, and strangely charming. Charm is critical, I said. "Survival is easier if the locals like you. And if they're beautiful and terrifying, that's just a bonus." She didn't reply immediately, but I noticed her shoulders easing slightly, a subtle acknowledgement that my irreverence was effective. She led me further into the structure, corridors bending impossibly, stairways looping into each other without ever seeming to end. At one point, I tripped over what appeared to be a gravity-shifting panel and crashed into a floating container. "I swear I'm trying to be graceful," I muttered, dusting off my jacket. "It's just that this building has a personal vendetta against humans." She suppressed a laugh, ears twitching in a way that made her seem less like an untouchable queen and more like a curious observer of a species she couldn't fully comprehend. Finally, we reached a central room, circular, with a dome that reflected the twin suns of the planet above. Suspended in the center was a crystalline structure, faintly glowing, radiating energy that made my skin tingle in a way I didn't entirely like. "This," she said, "is the core of our power and knowledge. It is both home and defense. It responds to thought, emotion, and will, and it has noted you." I raised an eyebrow. "It noticed me, great, I'm famous. Next thing I expect alien tabloids." She tilted her head, as though questioning whether I understood the magnitude of what I had just said. "It is aware of your persistence," she clarified. "Your wound, your humor, your survival instinct. It is curious." I grinned despite the ache in my side. Curious is good. Curious is better than angry, I find, makes negotiating easier. She studied me quietly, then, almost reluctantly, smiled. "Perhaps. Your species may endure, and even charm far beyond expectation. Yet there is still much to learn about you." I gave a mock salute. "Then consider me a willing subject, full disclosure. I don't take responsibility for the oddities that happen when humans are left unsupervised." She tilted her head, ears twitching, a gesture that I began to interpret as her way of laughing silently at my audacity. As the twin suns dipped toward the horizon, casting a fractured spectrum of light through the crystalline dome, I realized that I was not only surviving, I was somehow thriving. Humor, as always, was my lifeline. And here, in this impossible palace of living crystal and unfathomable technology, I began to sense that my injury, my resilience, and my irrepressible human absurdity were beginning to make an alien queen question everything she thought she knew about life, survival, and the limits of possibility. By the time the sun finally sank, and the palace pulsed gently in the dim light, we stood together near the crystalline core, human and alien, two species separated by galaxies yet inexplicably connected by curiosity, awe, and the subtle, shared understanding that surviving this world required both courage and a sense of humor, and maybe just a little insanity. The moment the alarm sounded, I realized that surviving in this world wasn't just about improvisation or humor anymore. It was about pure, unfiltered chaos. The crystalline palace shivered as if it had a pulse of its own, the walls bending light into a dizzying kaleidoscope that made my head spin. I stumbled over a floating stairway, muttering, "Okay, universe, can we negotiate? Maybe I just go quietly this time." The alien queen, standing a few paces ahead, didn't answer immediately, ears twitching in an almost imperceptible rhythm. Instead, she flicked her fingers, and a translucent barrier materialized between us and whatever threat had set the palace into motion. "Humans are remarkably adaptable," she said, voice calm despite the tremor of energy radiating through the walls. "But this will test you in ways even your species cannot anticipate." I gave her a mock salute. "Bring it on. Worst case, I end up famous as the guy who died spectacularly and made everyone else feel clever." She tilted her head, and I realized she was beginning to appreciate my absurdity as much as my resilience. The threat revealed itself gradually, a swarm of mechanical predators, sleek and silver, moving with coordinated precision that was unnerving. Each one was armed with a kind of energy-tipped appendage that hummed ominously. I glanced at the queen, who was calmly observing their movement patterns with eyes that missed nothing. "Do we negotiate, or is this a no-chill situation?" I asked, wriggling my fingers like I could pull something useful out of the ambient energy. She didn't answer immediately, just extended her hand, and the palace itself responded. Panels shifted, walls reconfigured, creating a labyrinthine path that was both protective and confusing for the intruders. "Adapt," she said simply. "Your survival depends on your ingenuity." I grinned, feeling the familiar adrenaline spike. Adaptability, check. Improvisation, check. Overconfidence. Slightly over, but still within recommended human parameters. As I dodged the first wave of attackers, I noticed that my wound had stopped pulsing oddly. The alien environment was stabilizing me. Nanite-like motes, probably from the palace itself, swirled around, repairing minor tissue damage while I ducked under a spinning appendage. "This is better than band-aids," I muttered, smirking at the fact that even in life-threatening danger, humor remained my lifeline. The alien queen moved with lethal grace, her presence orchestrating the palace's defenses. I realized that together we were an improbable team, her precision and foresight, my improvisation and reckless courage. I grabbed a piece of crystalline debris, swung it like a club, and it refracted energy into a focused beam that temporarily disabled one of the mechanical predators. "Hey, not bad for a human," she said, ears twitching in delight though her voice carried an edge of tension. We moved through corridors that reformed with every step, the palace literally bending to our will, or at least to hers. I made jokes to keep myself calm, quipping about how this place made IKEA look like child's play, and she allowed herself small smiles at my absurd comparisons. Her laughter was rare, alien, musical, and each time it echoed off the walls, it made the whole structure feel almost alive in a comforting way. The swarm was relentless, and I realized that survival required more than just humor or quick thinking. I had to trust her and myself, in ways I never had before. Together, we created a rhythm. She would predict the swarm's moves, I would improvise counterattacks, and the palace itself became our ally. I found myself slipping into a kind of flow state, where fear was present but manageable, and humor became a tool as vital as my weapons or instincts. At one point, a predator managed to corner me near a wall of liquid light. My arms were sore, my side ached from the old injury, and I felt a moment of pure panic. Then I remembered something she had said the first day. Curiosity and persistence, even when impossible, define you. I grinned despite the sting. "Persistence it is, then," I muttered, grabbing a floating shard and ricocheting it like a boomerang. The predator toppled, and I caught it with one hand, tossing it behind me with a theatrical flourish. "I call that style," I said, chest heaving. By the time we reached the core chamber, the last of the mechanical predators had been neutralized, or perhaps fled in confusion at our combined ingenuity. I collapsed near the crystalline heart of the palace, breathing heavily, and the queen knelt beside me, her long fingers brushing against my arm. "Your species, it continues to defy expectation," she said softly. "You are remarkable." I laughed softly despite the exhaustion. "Remarkable, that's generous. I call it stubborn with a dash of bad luck." She tilted her head, ears twitching, and for the first time I saw something deeper in her eyes. Respect, curiosity, and perhaps admiration. "You have changed this palace, and perhaps even me, more than I realized," she said. "Where we saw impossibility, you have found opportunity. Where we feared weakness, you have demonstrated strength." I grinned wryly. "That's humans for you. Weak, strong, stupid, clever, but always surviving, and hopefully not boring." She chuckled softly, a sound I realized I had begun to crave. "Perhaps not boring," she agreed. "You are necessary. A bridge between our worlds and proof that courage and humor can endure even the most alien of trials." The palace pulsed gently, as if acknowledging my words, the crystal walls shimmering in soft harmony. I realized that I had changed too. The fear I once carried in every step had been tempered by understanding, trust, and the strange, unexpected bond forming between myself and this alien queen. Humor had not only kept me alive, it had allowed me to see connections, to improvise in ways even the palace could not predict, and to survive what should have been impossible. We rose together, human and alien, standing before the heart of the palace as the twin suns rose again. I flexed my fingers, now steadier than they had been for days, and she observed me with a mixture of wonder and amusement. "Shall we explore what comes next?" I asked, brushing alien dust from my jacket. Her long ears twitched, and I knew that this time her answer would be both genuine and considered. "Yes," she said, voice rich and soft. "Together." I laughed, relief and exhilaration mixing in equal measure. "Together, then, and maybe, just maybe, with fewer near-death experiences next time, but no promises." As we walked through the crystalline corridors, I realized that surviving had been only the beginning. I had been tested, pushed to my limits, and yet found new resilience in myself. Humor had been my shield, courage my weapon, and in the process I had discovered something I hadn't anticipated: trust, connection, and the extraordinary possibility of bridging worlds. The sun's light fractured across the walls, bathing us in a spectrum of colors that I couldn't name, and I thought, not for the first time, that perhaps some worlds existed to remind humans just how strange, beautiful, and utterly alive the universe could be. And as the alien queen walked beside me, ears twitching in silent rhythm with her thoughts, I knew one thing for certain. I had survived, yes, but I had also grown, laughed, and learned that even across galaxies, courage and humor could create bonds no force could sever. For the first time in weeks, I felt the weight of exhaustion but also the warmth of accomplishment, and I realized that while the wounds of the body would heal, the experiences, the humor, and the connection with the most unlikely ally I had